we've had no wins on spending in like 2 or 3 decades. Paul Ryan kind of put us in this cul-de-sac forever. I think we're going to come away with this year with probably the largest mandatory savings ever, or adjusted for inflation since the 1997 balanced budget agreement. That's going to happen.
That was OMB Director Russ Vogt with Glenn Beck earlier today on what Trump's big, beautiful bill can do for America. So for more, let's go ahead and bring in Blaze Media DC correspondent Chris Bedford. So we've been talking a lot about this big, beautiful bill, right, for months on this show. So what's the holdup, right? If Donald Trump is so gung-ho about this, then why does Congress continue to drag their feet?
It's a slow-moving negotiation in general, and there's a couple of different committees, and each committee, as part of this process, has to come up with, they're assigned a certain number that they have to hit for cuts that they have to make. They have to work through that process. They have to figure out, okay, can every member on this committee approve this? Is this something that we're all okay with? And then would we be able to get it through the House of Representatives? And then would we be able to get it through the U.S. Senate? And there's a couple places that have been rather successful in this matter. Department of Energy and Commerce, for example, has finished. They, in fact, came in over their cuts. They were tasked with, I think it was like $800 billion or something. They came up with $880 billion in cuts, of course, subject to whatever remaining negotiations. Department of Agriculture is ready, is approaching ready. White House people, negotiators who I spoke with, said that they think that agriculture won't be a really big issue. They're about to get there. And, agriculture doesn't sound like it's that big, just farmlands, but it also includes the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, food stamps, things like that. So it's actually a pretty big deal. And then what everyone's all eyes are on is the Ways and Means Committee, which has to come up with the tax cuts, has to figure that out and to balance it, make it work, make it palatable to the liberals in the Republican Party, and make it palatable at the same time to the conservatives in the Republican Party, and then get the White House's blessing. Now, they've been screwed up a couple times. One, every time Speaker Mike Johnson walks into the room, he screws something up. Two, they have a back and forth. They have a back and forth right now that's going on with how they can figure out the SALT tax cuts, which stands for state and local taxes. Now, traditionally, the federal government is essentially covered for extremely expensive, high-tax blue states and their different counties by allowing people to write off their taxes up to a certain level and not have to pay federal taxes and those things that they paid locally. This is a difficult thing. It's kind of a bailout for blue states. It's something that's difficult for the federal government to really, for conservatives to really think about. As one friend who's involved in these negotiations said, why should a farmer in Nebraska be paying for the taxes of Greenwich, Connecticut? It shouldn't be an actual thing. But these Republicans are really pushing for the SALT write-offs, the ones who are from New York, the ones who are from New Jersey. They lost this. They lost their ability to do this in the 2017 Trump tax cuts. They took that away. And one of the reasons they took that away was because the moderates burned all of their bridges to Trump world. So no one felt like they actually had to take care of these guys. No one actually thought that they were important. And the only way that moderates get power at all in the U.S. Congress is by access to power. They have to be in the good graces of the leadership. They have to be in the good graces of the president if they want to get any access to that power. They didn't have that in 2017. They were in trouble in 2017. And it was actually real. I mean, I know districts, for example, in Connecticut, where talking about the local House and the local Senate of the state, people lost races. Republicans, incumbents lost races to people who never even campaigned. A friend of mine who was in the Republican Party of Connecticut said he got a phone call from the guy who won apologizing over it. He said, I feel kind of guilty. I got drafted. I said, yes, I didn't even knock on a single door or make a phone call, but I won because of the D next to my name. So there was a big Trump backlash that was going on in these states. So Trump said, to heck with these guys. And the conservatives around D.C. said, to heck with these guys. And they essentially raised their taxes. They knocked down the amount that you're able to write off in SALT to $10,000. Now, this is like a roundabout answer to what you're asking about. But now those guys want it to go back up. Everybody since 2017 has campaigned on being able to bring some tax relief to their donors, to their voters. And they want $100,000 cap. The thing is, if you're paying $100,000 in taxes to New Jersey, then you probably you're not somebody who's in serious need for a tax cut. You're a wealthy person. Your problems are expensive, but you have the money to pay for them. So it's terrible messaging for a populace. It's terrible messaging for conservatives to figure this out. But the GOP and Donald Trump needs these votes. You can't tell, like you did in 2017, New York and New Jersey to take a hike. You have to bring them on. They can tank this bill. So now that there's delicate negotiations going around that, what is the cap going to be? Folks I've talked to predicted it's going to be about $30,000. Will be the cap, so they can go back and say, listen, we've tripled the amount that we're able to write off. I brought you back a victory. Otherwise, I'm going to lose office and my voters are going to get rid of me. But that's not even the biggest fight. And I got more coming out next week. I just have to finish doing all the research. But how exactly they're going to deal with Medicaid? What's going on with that? Why are working, able-bodied adult males able to get Medicaid in a higher percentage, essentially, than women and disabled and people who don't actually have the ability, pregnant people, elderly people, or the elderly, I guess, have Medicare, people who need these resources. All of these social relief programs were invented because we as a society looked around and said, we don't want people to die for a lack of medical care because of poverty. We want to be able to help those people who cannot help themselves, as Calvin Coolidge phrased it. They've become programs that are just a way to not have to work. And a lot of people are using this generationally, and that's a huge issue. And Republicans are angry about it, but that's the next fight that's going to happen because, once again, those blue state Republicans don't want to do anything to cut Medicaid. And like we talked about earlier this week, there's nothing you can really do to even change anything, work requirements, whatever. The Democrats aren't going to call a cut and campaign against you on. So long-winded answer. Well, my baby screamed and my little boy was rifling through boxes right next to my ear for some reason. But that is the kind of complicated stuff that the Republicans are dealing with in Congress, and it takes time.
Well, unlike the mess in Congress, we cannot hear your baby screaming. It seems peaceful, just peaceful sound of your own voice. I wish I had this technology when my kids were younger. So let's leave the mess of the budget behind and the budget complications behind, and look at something that I thought was very interesting and alarming today, and that's the media swamp. Let's look at some of our competitors, I guess you could call them, out there. Emily Jashinsky with UnHerd dropped this bombshell. We got leaked documents here showing that Punchbowl News is offering corporations editorial influence for the right price. Let's talk about that. Is this the new journalism, or maybe it's the old journalism?
It's the new journalism, same as the old journalism. I mean, Punchbowl are essentially unregistered lobbyists who read Punchbowl yesterday, for example, is to get an inside scoop at how much Jake Sherman, this annoying reporter who's always been around for as long as I've been in DC, is pushing for these SALT deductions. It's completely fake. It's a total advocacy. Listen, as one friend who I was talking to earlier today, one colleague who works and is actually involved in some of the negotiations on the taxes, said, if Punchbowl was good at its job, then corporations wouldn't actually need to hire lobbyists. They would be able to read that newsletter, maybe pay a premium. And this is, by the way, these prices are far lower than they used to be for these sorts of newsletters. They'd be able to pay to read Punchbowl, follow it, and know everything that was going on in Capitol Hill. They wouldn't need to pay someone else to do it. Punchbowl doesn't actually really offer that service, though. They pretend to. It's a complete fabrication. I mean, and they really do jealously pretend to. They're extremely catty. When Rebecca, for example, breaks news, they are enraged that it didn't go to them. How dare Rebecca be the person who breaks news? Well, she was doing the work, and she wasn't threatening people the way that you guys were. Instead, what they often do is they push these different issue advocacy things. They push their agenda. They spread Capitol Hill gossip, which is, fun, but not necessarily that helpful. And they create all these false cliffs and these false deadlines. And not only that, but their reporting has been suffering more and more lately. There's always a risk when you're a reporter to get stuck into, especially in DC, to get stuck in the mindset of a bygone era. How the budget is put together in 2025 is very different from how the budgets were put together 10 years ago. And you need to update your knowledge, update your understanding of the new speakership, update your understanding of the power of committees, update your understanding of these processes, and stop just pulling fire alarms essentially and spreading gossip, which is what Punchbowl does on the regular. And peddling influence, selling influence, it's kind of the game. And for so much of Washington, it's really disgusting. I mean, I remember examples of Middle Eastern money going around when I was at a nonprofit journalism outfit, trying to sponsor a reporter. And the sponsorship was going to entail, I would like you to, a reporter who can focus on the business environment in the Middle East. Which seems like a pretty innocuous thing. There's no editorial input there. And we said, heck no, this is extremely sketchy. We're not going to take foreign governments' money to report on even just a region that's beyond the pale. And then a few months later, they got busted. And it turned out everyone from the esteemed Brookings Institute down to the newspapers were taking these guys' money. And we were the only ones who had said no. It was, it makes you feel a little silly in the end when you realize just how crooked Washington actually is.